Hi everyone, I'm Mr. Dennis and I'm here to share with you about social innovation in the Diploma of Community Development here at the School of Humanities and Social Sciences, Ngee Polytechnic. So let's get started and jump right into things. All right, let's keep it simple. What I'm going to do is break down social innovation into what is innovation and what is social. Right. For innovation, we can broadly categorize it into many categories, but today we are going to focus on three. The first one is new technology, the second one is disruptive technology, and the third one is uh, basically new ways of doing business, so new business models. Let's jump into some of these examples, right? So for new technology and products, actually new technology or products that have been developed, right, to make some of the things that we have to do either more convenient. Uh, it makes things easier for us to go about doing our chores, or it makes it more efficient and effective. All right, so some examples you can see here, right, are actually drones where you actually can transport items, right, without the need of having pilots, and you can do it remotely, safely, and cheaply. Um, and then there's also electric cars or electric vehicles, which are replacing the more traditional but polluting forms of transport. Next, we have disruptive technology. So these are new technologies that tend to disrupt the traditional way of doing things. It creates new ways of doing things, and in a lot of instances, they actually replace not just how things are done, but also the people that used to do them. So some jobs can be displaced by disruptive technology. Right, a very good example is actually the internet. So many of you can't imagine a time when there was no internet, right? Um, and that's how disruptive it has been, because there was an era, right, just almost 20 over years ago, when internet wasn't accessible to everyone, right? And since then, it has replaced basically many ways where we work, how we do work, how we play, and how we communicate, as well as how we are entertained, right? And of course, many jobs have been made redundant since the arrival of the internet. Another new disruptive technology that we are quite familiar with these days is actually artificial intelligence. And artificial intelligence is gradually creeping into different aspects of our lives. And we see a lot when we surf the internet, right? So we go onto certain websites and they are quite predictive with their algorithm in terms of what we are searching for on the website. One example will be how we interact with chatbots. So some chatbots are quite predictive in terms of the kind of questions that we're trying to ask and how they answer the questions. They actually rely on artificial intelligence to reply us when we have a question on these chatbots. All right, next, it's not always about creating new tech or new products, but even just conducting business in a new format is also considered an innovation. All right, so let's look at some of these examples, which I think we are all quite familiar with. Right, so Airbnb is a disruptive way of doing business. It's a new way of doing business, right? Where you no longer have to rely on just hotels when you go overseas for accommodation. And then we also have Grab, where car owners can easily provide transportation to anyone besides just having to rely on the taxi or on public transport. And of course, a lot of us are now very involved with online shopping, right? And that has shifted a lot of shopping away from traditional uh, brick and mortar kind of physical shopping to shopping that is now done entirely on the internet. All right, let's move on now. We'll talk about the social bit. So we are moving into the space of people, right? When we talk about social, it's not just about um, human interaction, but really it's about knowing the different uh, aspects of society and community, right? So here in community development, when we talk about social, right, we're referring to the different groups, different communities of people that exist, right, in our society. And there are a lot of groups, right, which are marginalized. And of course, this is just a sampling of those groups, which you may be more familiar with. So you can see on the left, right, we have communities in this social structure where you have the elderly folks, right? And then you have people with disabilities, you have people who are homeless, right? The destitute. And of course, you have children with special learning needs. You have ex-offenders, and also not forgetting migrant workers that also exist uh, alongside us in our communities and our society. Right. It's not always just about people, but social is also about aspects of life that affects us, right, as people, or affects various communities. So you can see some of the issues here that you see on screen affects us in a social way, right? So examples that you may be more familiar with, in the past year, basically we have issues of food shortage, right, here in Singapore because of the disruption in logistics. There was also, panic buying. And besides food shortage, a lot of times what we are faced with is also food wastage, right? Um, and of course, there are also environmental issues, right, of pollution, as well as endangerment to some of these wildlife that's being endangered due to certain destruction to either their environment or to the resources that they rely on for food. Right. So a lot of these issues that we have covered, right, in terms of marginalized groups in our society, as well as issues affecting us as people, um, they result in a whole host of what we call human-centric problems or issues, right? So you can see this list on the screen. It's not exhaustive, right? There are more issues, right? But these are some that are linked to the communities and the issues that I just covered, right? So you have issues of poverty, addiction, loneliness when it comes to the elderly, and of course, we have issues of social isolation. And in Singapore, we do have an aging population, and I think more and more there's also awareness of marginalized groups of people that suffer from mental health issues. And then, of course, you have more environmental issues that also affect us as people, where we have pollution, food waste, access to clean water, food scarcity, and also human and wildlife trafficking issues. Right. So when we put the two topics that we have covered so far, right, social and innovation, right, what social innovation is about, right, at its most fundamental level, is really about connecting these issues that we just talked about, human-centric societal problems, with innovative solutions and technology, right? And the criteria for social innovation to work, to be considered successful, is that it has to be effective, efficient, and I think most importantly, it should be sustainable, right? So all this technology and all these efforts and the models that we come up with to solve the problems should be able to sustain over a period of time, or should be able to sustain so that the impact uh, can be meaningful. right? So here are some examples of social innovation that we have in Singapore, right? So in terms of food scarcity, shortage of food and land space, what we have now as we are going into uh, new technology is really urban farming. So you have an efficient way of using land space, and it's also effective in producing some of the food supply that we need here in Singapore. All right. We also have initiatives such as silver zones for seniors. So as we mentioned earlier, there is an aging population in Singapore, and how we can innovate, right, to accommodate to their needs, is to make sure that the environment is still safe for them. So you can see here in the pictures, right, what the government has done is to include features on our public roads so that traffic is slower and more mindful of senior citizens who are using the pedestrian crossings. All right. Over here, we also have examples of products which have been designed by an NUS graduate who is a design student. He designed products that are meant to cater to the visually impaired. So the visually impaired will find these products very useful and effective in helping them go about their daily chores, right? And protects them from getting burned, protects them from getting from cutting themselves, and also protects them from making a mess in the kitchen. All right, next we also have social enterprises in Singapore, which is a good example of social innovation, right? Where business owners are trying to leverage their own business models such that there is social benefit, social impact from how they conduct their business, right? So some examples here, you may be more familiar with would be 18 Chefs, where the chain of restaurants actually hire ex-offenders as part of their workforce. We also have social enterprises like Geylang Adventures, right? The owner actually runs community trails for locals and tourists, and a lot of his funds goes into providing help for migrant workers, right? So he creates a lot of awareness for migrant workers also through the content of his trails and tours. We also have personalized love, right? Where the owner actually runs workshops for leather crafting, and the leather crafting instructors are actually youths with special needs. They not just only conduct workshops, but they also create very customized leathercraft pieces to be sold. And of course, right here in Ngee Poly on campus, we have our own social enterprise as well, called Dialogue in the Dark. Right. So Dialogue in the Dark is actually run by a group of visually impaired employees, and these employees, their roles are functioning as guides to workshops and also tours in a very specialized facility for people to experience the dark and also to empathize with the visually impaired. All right. So here in the Diploma of Community Development, other than just understanding what social innovation is about, you will actually be equipped with certain knowledge and tools, right, that will help you to innovate for those human-centric issues, right? So some of the tools that you get to learn about will be design thinking. We also equip you with knowledge to do community development, right? Asset-based community development, how to map communities. We also equip you with theory of change, as well as how to design a social enterprise business model. All right, so let's jump into an activity that you can try today, right? To figure out what might be your social innovation. You can actually start designing one today, right now, in your own home. Right. So the first thing you want to identify, right, in this equation is what is your spark, right? So what I mean by spark is really what is something you are passionate about, right, in terms of your interests. So what are your hobbies, right? And amongst these hobbies, think of things that you enjoy doing, and you do for leisure, and it's maybe a pastime that you have invested quite some time in, right? It can also be a talent that you have. All right. So some examples of sparks, right, or interests and hobbies. So they're really things like music, art. Maybe some of you are interested in writing, and some of you, your hobby might be reading, or it can even be, your love or passion for animals. So maybe you own a pet. Okay, so you can identify one of these interests. Well, it may not even have to be in this table, but identify it as your spark. All right, next, the second part of the equation. What is your fire? And when I mean fire, right, your fire is an issue that kind of troubles you, right? It keeps you up at night. It's something that you think is a problem and it needs to be solved, right? So it's a gap in the community or an issue in society that you feel passionate about, right? So here are some examples, right? You could be, passionate about the environment, issues of hunger. Maybe you are, your fire could be just simply things like food wastage, a shortage of food, natural disasters, maybe, or even issues of bullying, violence. Um, yeah, there are so many things that you can feel is an issue that you are passionate about. So that you can identify as your fire. Right, next, we move on to the third part of the equation, right? It's an abbreviation, right? ASAP. It's how you can act on your spark and your fire, right? So you can create awareness, right? So the first A stands for awareness. We have S for service, right? So you can do a service to the issue or the community that you're passionate about. There's also advocacy. So aside from just raising general awareness, advocacy goes one step further to actually take action after you have created awareness for it. There is also philanthropy, right? So philanthropy could be fundraising, uh, creating a charity event, or it could also be just simply uh, receiving donations. Right, so this is how the whole equation looks like, right? You're going to combine your spark, your fire, as well as components of ASAP, and that is how you create change. Sounds complicated? Okay, it's not. Let me give you some examples. All right, so let's say my interest, right, is in food, right? That's my spark, and my fire is I have a passion for issues of global hunger, right? And then I can combine it with uh, an element of ASAP, which is service, right? So how can I conduct a service that will address issues of hunger, right? In this case, my innovative project may be to start sustainable urban farms, all right? So just take note that you can actually overlap over a few elements of ASAP, right? Because in most cases, you are likely to already create awareness when you take action, right? So, for example, if you are advocating for children obesity, right, and your spark, which is your interest, is in sports, um, most likely when you're advocating for the issue, you're already creating awareness, right? And in this case, the project is how to create, better sports programs in school, right? So that you can combine sports to help children who are facing obesity issues. Maybe we'll look at one more example, right? Let's look at the last row where your spark or interest could be in fashion, and you feel that the issue that you're worried about is exploitation, right? It could be child labor in overseas countries, and the ASAP element could be creating awareness, right? So you can actually create an online campaign, right, to raise awareness against factories that are exploiting uh, child labor to create fashion apparel. All right, so I hope today's session has been meaningful for all of you, and you've been equipped with the knowledge of what social innovation is and also how you can go about thinking about what your innovation might be. So the thought I'm going to leave you with is, how are you going to start making a change today? Thanks, everyone.